samurai barely used swords. Seriously, that image in your head, with the katana as the star of the show, is mostly a movie invention. For centuries, their main weapon was the bow, then the spear. The sword was more of a backup plan, not the center of their training. Today we're going to look at several real facts about samurai. Some of them might surprise you quite a bit. Let's start with the name itself. Samurai comes from a term that basically meant one who serves. They didn't start out as legendary warriors by birthright. They started as armed servants, protecting the lands of powerful nobles, in a Japan that was divided and constantly in conflict. Over time, that role turned into an entire social class, with its own rules, its own hierarchies, and a code of conduct that took shape over centuries. Today we know that code is bushido, the way of the warrior. But here's an interesting twist. A big part of what we associate with bushido, blind loyalty, honor above everything else, was formally written down much later, during peacetime, almost like an idealized nostalgia for what a samurai should have been. Let's talk about seppuku. Ritual suicide. You've probably heard about this before, though maybe not the full picture. It wasn't just stabbing yourself with a sword out of dishonor. It was an extremely formal ritual, with specific steps, specific clothing, and almost always a second samurai present. Their only job to quickly behead the person right after the initial cut, to reduce suffering. That assistant had an actual title, kaishakunin, and their role was considered just as important as the samurai performing the ritual. Now, something almost never shown in movies. Female samurai existed. They were called onabu geisha, and they weren't some rare or symbolic exception. They trained with a short-bladed polearm with a curved blade, designed to defend even inside tight spaces, like the inside of a house, extremely useful when the men of the family were away at war. Archaeological digs at old battlefields have uncovered the remains of women with real combat wounds. Their involvement wasn't just domestic. Here's a fact that tends to surprise people. Samurai used firearms, way earlier than you'd think. When Portuguese traders arrived in Japan in the 16th century carrying matchlock guns, the Japanese didn't just adopt them quickly, they improved them. Within a fairly short time, Japan was producing more firearms than several European countries combined. There were decisive battles won thanks to samurai firing in coordinated formations, a surprisingly modern tactic for the era. And yet, after the internal wars ended, Japan entered a long period of relative peace under a centralized government. And here's where something curious happened. Firearms started getting deliberately restricted, not because they stopped working, but because they threatened the social balance. A well-trained farmer with a matchlock gun could defeat a samurai with years of sword training. And for the power structure at the time, that was a serious problem. During that long peace with no wars to justify their original purpose, samurai transformed into something else entirely. Administrators, bureaucrats, poets, practitioners of calligraphy and tea ceremony. The image of the warrior in constant battle doesn't represent most of the samurai who ever existed. It mostly represents the earliest centuries. Later on, many never saw real combat in their entire lives, and yet they kept the title, the status, and the right to carry two swords as a symbol of their class. Let's talk about the end. It's one of the most interesting parts, and one of the least known. The samurai era didn't end in some legendary battle against an outside enemy. It ended by decree. In the late 19th century, during a period of rapid modernization, the Japanese government decided to build a modern army, mandatory for everyone, not reserved for a hereditary class. Carrying swords in public was banned by law. The stipends that had financially supported the samurai class for centuries were eliminated. Almost overnight, in historical terms, thousands of samurai became ordinary citizens, with no special status at all. Some accepted the change. They integrated into the country's new structure, many quite successfully. Others didn't accept it. There was an armed rebellion, the last major samurai resistance, led by warriors who refused to disappear without a fight. It was crushed by the new modern army, equipped with Western weaponry, the exact same kind of technology samurai themselves had helped bring into the country centuries earlier. That's a pretty strong historical irony if you think about it calmly. The very class that helped modernize Japan's weapons ended up defeated by that same modernization a few generations later. Today, the image of the samurai survives mostly as a cultural symbol, mixed with myth, with movies, with a whole lot of idealization. But the real history, once you look closely, turns out to be far more complex, far more human, and in several ways far more interesting than the legend that ended up replacing it. See you in the next video.